Do you ever wonder why the rich buy real estate? Is there really a difference in how the rich invest in real estate? Could you copy how the rich invest and grow your wealth? In this video, I will explain a financial resource attached to real estate, which makes it so attractive to the rich. Watch to the end to understand how the rich invest in real estate and make thousands of dollars more than you. This is Growth Guide, your simple guide to growing your wealth. Let's say you own an asset worth $100. Then, after a period of time, it appreciates in value to $150. You sell it. How much profit did you make? You may be tempted to think $50, but these three words eat into your profits. Capital gains tax. Because selling an asset you own for a profit is seen as income, the taxman wants a slice of the cake in the form of capital gains tax. Every country has different structures regarding capital gains tax. However, the profit of the asset sale will contribute to your income. Depending on what tax bracket you fall into and how long you hold the asset, you'll be taxed accordingly. Let's say you earn $70,000 per year. The sum of the asset sale and your income puts you in the 30% tax bracket. Effectively, the profit of the asset sale will be taxed at 30%. So, after your $150 sale, you split that $50 profit with yourself and the taxman. His 30% is $15 and you get the remaining $35. Doesn't sound like a big deal, does it? Well, let's scale that to real estate terms. You own a $500,000 investment property. It appreciates to $750,000. You sell it, and now that $250,000 profit contributes to your taxable income. Let's say the tax bracket you fit into is now 40%. You end up paying a tax bill of $100,000. You can whinge and whine about how unfair the system is, or you could just learn to play the game, like how the rich do. What if I told you that the rich use a financial tool of real estate that allows them to get the appreciation without paying the taxman his slice? The rich don't invest in real estate to make profits from the sale of the property. They use the financial tool called home equity loans. To explain home equity loans, we need to understand equity and loan-to-value ratio, LVR. Equity is the percentage share of the asset you own. So, if a property is worth $1 million and you have 20% equity in the property, you own $200,000 of the $1 million. As we use loans to buy properties, we share the ownership with a bank, meaning that the bank is effectively our investment partner. However, banks take on some risk by lending out big sums of money. One big risk is who they lend to. If the person cannot pay back the loan, it exposes the bank to risk and headaches. The other big risk is the asset they are lending for. Banks understand that asset values are influenced by market conditions. To manage their exposure to financial risks, the bank will offer a loan-to-value ratio, LVR, which is the percentage of the total asset value they are willing to lend. So, for example, if the value of the property is $1 million and the bank is willing to lend 90% LVR, then they are saying that they'll lend you $900,000 and you as the borrower need to bring the other $100,000 as a deposit to the table. So, you own 10% of the asset and the bank is willing to lend you a maximum of 90% of the asset value. But the asset is under your name, so any appreciation of the asset is yours. The bank makes their money from the interest they charge you to borrow their money. Therefore, the bank is interested in the interest payments of the loan, and you are interested in the asset appreciation. That's equity and loan value ratios. So, how do home equity loans work? Let's use an example to illustrate. You find an investment property you are interested in valued at $1 million. You take this information to your broker and they say the bank is willing to lend 90% LVR. This means you put in $100,000, the bank brings the other $900,000 and now you own the asset, so you have 10% equity in the asset. A year later, the asset has appreciated 10%. Now the value of the asset is $1,100,000. Now things have changed. The asset is under your name, and therefore the appreciation is also your share. So, $1,100,000 minus the bank's $900,000 equals $200,000. Your equity in the asset is now worth $200,000, which is 18.18% equity. This is where the LVR comes in handy. With the new value of the property, the LVR has dropped from 90% LVR to 81.81% LVR. This is calculated by the $900,000 divided by the new valuation of $1,100,000, which is 81.81% LVR. At the current value of the asset, a 90% LVR would mean a loan of $990,000, which is 90% of the current asset value. So $1,100,000 multiplied by 90%. This is where you can utilize home equity loans to restore the loan back to 90% LVR and borrow that $90,000 using the asset. This means from your original investment, which was your deposit of $100,000, you got a 90% return on investments. And because you didn't have to sell the asset, then the next time the asset appreciates again, you can repeat this strategy again. Equity loans are classified as debt, not income. You are literally borrowing using your equity in the asset. Therefore, you can harness the appreciation of the asset without the taxman asking for his slice of the cake. This is why the rich buy real estate. It allows them to access the appreciation and not pay the taxman. James and George work together and decide to start building a real estate portfolio. They saw a duplex property for sale. The vendor is selling each half separately. George encourages James to buy with him so they can start their investment portfolio together. James did his due diligence and thought it was a good idea. They both bought a half for $1 million at 90% LVR with a $100,000 deposit. After a year, the asset appreciated 10%, now being valued at $1,100,000. George was ecstatic and decided to sell while the price was great. He sold the property for $1,100,000 and made a profit of $100,000. Now, the taxman heard this and lined up for his slice. George's income and the $100,000 profit from the sale combined put George into the 40% tax bracket. In most countries, governments incentivize you to hold on to assets longer than a year by reducing your capital gains tax obligations. George and James live in Australia, where if you hold an asset longer than a year, only 50% of the profit contributes to the tax. The taxman says to George, "You held this asset for a year, so I'll only take 50% of the profit into account for capital gains." So only $50,000 will be taxed at 40%. The taxman hands George his 40% bill of $20,000. After paying the taxman his slice, George kept the remaining $30,000 plus the other half of the profits, coming to a total of $80,000. George was over the moon. He got his $100,000 deposit and an additional $80,000 profit from the sale. George said to James, "I got an 80% return on my investment. Why don't you do the same?" James, who spent the year reading up on debt structuring, decided to take out a home equity loan against his equity gain. James ended up accessing $90,000 from his investment appreciation, which was a 90% return on his investment, plus he also kept the asset. George was confused. How did James get $10,000 more than me without selling the property? James explained home equity loans and said to George, it's not about trying to get out of debt, but using debt to make money. James explained further that he would use this $90,000 as a deposit for his next property. That way, in another year's time, he could repeat this strategy on both properties, so the portfolio will multiply. His investments will fund more investments, and all this with little involvement from the taxman. Every time George buys and sells assets, he always has the taxman lined up to take a slice, which leaks money, and also George loses time in the market. That's why the rich buy real estate. It allows them to use the financial resources to utilize their gains without leaking money to the taxman. The rich know that it's all about harnessing the outcomes of asset appreciation without sharing their slice of the cake. The rich don't try to pay off investments to get out of debt. They use debt structuring to multiply their assets. If you find these resources of value, then hit the subscribe button and leave a comment below. Remember, these tools are available to everyone, not just to an exclusive club. So why not just copy what the rich do and play the game to win? Hit the subscribe button and view the next video and get more simple guides to grow your wealth.